I don't know what it's worth now, $3 or if it's worth anything. SoftBank came in, but 10 major mutual funds are in this. Do you think the average person knows what they're doing with people's money?
Barry, my experience in talking to the average person who's investing in the market, generally they can't even tell me what they're invested in. So to answer you, obviously, if they can't tell you, and I'm just talking about they may not even remember the organizations, and certainly can't tell you which funds or what kind of mix they have. Well, obviously, they have a clue. The answer is no. They don't have any idea.
My money. Money. I get money from you.
Money in the bank.
Young money.
Money, 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 money. It's a rich man's world.
Welcome to the Economic Warrior Show. My name is Barry James Dyke. You can find out more about me at barrymjamesdyke.com or any of my books, which I've sold in 23 countries. And it's an honor and a pleasure to have my old friend on, Ted Benna, who is the creator of the 401k. And thank you so much for being here, Ted. We're going to go over some things about your background and so forth. But you're originally a farm boy, and now you're back in the farm. But could you tell us, Ted, how you get started in the retirement business with Provident Mutual, I guess? How do you start there?
Well, Barry, I got married at a young age, and my wife and I ended up in Philadelphia, and I needed a job. So I looked in the one ads, I saw a job for a mathematical clerk, which was my strong suit, and it just happened to be in the home office of Provident Mutual Life Insurance Department in their pension department, Barry. That was how I got started. So.
Yeah. So you start with the old rate books. I remember that. I mean, I used to have a pension administration business, and we used to have to hand calculate that stuff. So, but it was good because it made you understand the numbers behind the benefits. Am I correct?
Well, yeah, for sure. I was an actuarial grunt, Barry, and so I was probably involved in cranking out the tables, which you used to do your calculations.
I remember the big rate books. Remember, they were huge. I mean, I don't know if you remember it was the onion paper. So, but now it's all software. But so how long you with Provident Mutual? Like 5 years, and then what happened?
Yeah, it was 5.5 years there, Barry, and it was really a great place to be because I had some wonderful people to learn from. And but what happened in that environment was that I could know that if I stayed there for 20 years or more,
Yeah.
I knew where I might be in 20 years. The opportunity was pretty limited. I might be an assistant vice president or whatever. And so I was definitely interested in opportunities beyond that. And so what happened was I eventually got shifted into the administrative area at Provident, and so that put me in contact with people like you and others that are out in the field actually selling these plans, and that exposed me to getting solicited and being given job offers, and I accepted one of them with a couple of young guys who had been agents with Provident Mutual, and they were Ed and Dave Johnson. We joined them to start up a benefit company, Barry, from scratch.
Was that the Johnson & Johnson benefit company or something like that? Johnson?
Well, actually, there were two companies. There was a property and casualty,
yeah,
and then the benefit company was Johnson Benna Company. And so for trading purposes, we shifted to the Johnson companies, to make it simpler, for trading.
And so then, so what were you doing at the time? You guys were doing essentially, were you doing defined benefit plans or the old HR 10 plans, things like that?
Yeah, actually, Barry, you would remember the split funded plans. I mean, we sold split funded defined benefit plans and also ones that were deposit administration funding and funded. I didn't know anything about defined contribution plans, which is funny, Larry, because I'm labeled kind of as the guy who killed pension plans, all right? And So the first time I got involved, potentially in a defined contribution plan, Dave Johnson was taking me out to meet with one of his auto dealer clients who was considering putting in a profit sharing plan. And we were competing with their bank. And I didn't know anything about what a profit sharing plan was. So I had to pull out my Prentice Hall guides and you read up on this stuff.
And you read on the run. And but yeah, but you knew the fundamentals of the plans. I think back in the old days, Ted, not that I think there was more concern or there's more focus on the fundamentals of risk protection and getting, retirement plans and the proper amount of life insurance and disability and all that stuff. I mean, really the fundamentals. I don't know if that's how your situation was, but wasn't it that way back then?
Well, yeah, the plans were operated pretty conservative back in those days, definitely, Barry.
And now they're all out of control. But so you're doing this profit sharing plan for an auto dealer. So is this is this with the germ or the 401k? Is this what happened then?
Well, at least I became familiar. There's something called a defined contribution plan. But moving forward, actually, what really forced the huge change, Barry, was we had the Employee Retirement Income Security Act, known as ERISA,
Yeah.
passed in 1974.
Yep.
And what happened, I don't know how much detail you want to go in on this, but it became impossible to sell pension plans after ERISA was enacted.
Yeah.
It became impossible. So I had no choice, to continue a career in the retirement business. I had to find a way to shift away from defined benefit plans. And that actually started initially, my major effort to do that was with KEO plans, HR10 plans.
HR10 plans.
You have enough gray hair, you know about that.
I've sold a lot of HR10s, yeah. And
that was the first opportunity, Barry. I had to look into internal revenue provisions and law and realize, hey, there's an opportunity here that hasn't been taken advantage of. So what I designed were HR10 plans that could be funded via self-directed brokerage accounts. And so we just simply charged consulting fees to help doctors and law firms and accounting firms, set up those type of plans. That was really how we, deeply engaged into our consulting business.
So that's how it started, and it took a long time too, Ted. It wasn't like switching on a light. It took you had to go through quite some period of time that this whole thing came about. Am I correct?
Well, that would have been 1974.
Yeah.
And so the legislation that added 401k to the Internal Revenue Code was passed in 1978. So that was 74 to 78, and that provision didn't become effective until January of 80. So January 80 is when when the first 401k savings plan that I designed became effective.
Wow. Okay. So yeah, and that was but when you originally designed the 401k, or you saw this opportunity, essentially a salary savings plan, a deferral plan. The 401k was never meant to be replace a defined benefit or a defined contribution money purchase plan. It was just really meant to be like an ornament on a Christmas tree. It was never meant to be the main event, was it?
Oh, absolutely, Barry. It was only a page and a half long. That's how the legislation was. And what it was designed to do is to give a legal framework for operating employer-funded cash-deferred profit-sharing plans.
Yeah.
Nothing to do with employee contributions. And so what happened was I saw the potential of using that particular section to add what has become the driver for 401k plans, and that was having an employer matching contribution and being able to also have employee pre-tax contributions. And that's what really launched 401k to become the big thing that it has. And clearly it was never intended be the primary way for people to build their retirement savings. And, as a result of that, Barry, it's easy to understand why, there's so much concern on a national level about the fact that, these plans, they have gaps, they weren't intended to, to be the mainstream.
But that's what's happened, Ted, and so what has happened? So we've had a migration really from the true pension plan, i.e., like a defined benefit, or Social Security is a defined benefit of sorts, really to essentially you're on your own. Welcome to the Wall Street casino world, and that's what it's so huge. I mean, I was talking to John Kay in the UK the other week, okay, and they had the same thing in the United Kingdom and Canada and Australia. Australia, they call them superannuation plans. But to me, it's just turned into one big casino. What is your thoughts, Ted?
Well, that's definitely a bit of a reality. But Barry, one thing that's not understood is, when we get talk about, well, we need to go back to where everybody has a pension plan, and they retire and get an income stream for life, like everybody used to do. Well, we never had more than 50% of private employees who were covered by a pension plan. And also, going back to the good old days, hey, the pension plan I was covered under Provident Mutual, Barry, you had to stay until you were age 60 to get a benefit. If you left before that, you didn't get anything. Okay? And when businesses went under and failed in those days, you generally lost your benefit. So, the reality is the pension systems, whether it's Social Security, state or federal plans, or private employer plans, have historically been allowed legally to promise benefits that have never been properly funded.
Yeah.
So participants in these plans today have as much investment risk as they do in 401ks. They just don't know it.
I would agree with you, Ted, because I have a couple of I have a good friend of mine who's an actuary. I call him a recovering actuary, and Steve Church, Scattical Research. If anyone wants to listen to a real authority on this stuff, and Ted, he just did a calculation: 127 public, state, and public retirement plans. Within 1 year, Ted, the unfunded liability went from like 5.5 trillion to like 7.9 trillion, something just ridiculous. So, but most people, now you're in Pennsylvania, which is has a huge defined benefit plan. But I think Pennsylvania is like, all these pension plans are stuck with all these private equity, distressed debt and credit and real estate, all this crap that no one understands. So it's a huge problem now too. So you're right. I mean, I didn't want to talk about the defined benefit plan, but a lot of the stuff is even more risky, and most people don't know, do they?
Yeah, no, they don't, Barry. And the latest book I wrote is 401k 40 years later, and one of the sections of it explains why, if you're in a defined benefit plan and you have the opportunity, when you retire, to get either all or some of your money out of it, whatever you can get out is cash. There are a lot of reasons why you should do that, and explain that in detail in the book. Definitely, that's an issue. But so the situation certainly similar with 401k, and the big concern I have, Barry, that I wrote about, and also in this book, and that is the fact that most people who are retiring or who are already retired, who are following traditional investment advice, are assuming a much higher level of risk than they can afford.
Ted, it's just, and this is, thank you so much, and you're a man of faith, and which I greatly admire you for. There's so much risk out there, Ted, and it's incomprehensible. But we'll get into that in a second. But so Ted, so you created the 401k, and then did you sell the business, or did you sell? How did that work?
Well, we built the business to about 250 employees, Barry, and
wow, okay.
we sold it in 1990. I
Okay.
got locked into a 3-year contract, and when that was up, I was off on my own then,
Okay.
and
All
have
right.
been ever since.
Okay. So well, good for you. So at least you benefited. So I look at this now, Ted. If you look at the giant asset managers now, Fidelity, Vanguard, State Street, BlackRock, Invesco, you name it. Okay. They have trillions of assets now, and most of this is under 401k money or IRA or
Sure.
simple money, whatever, Ted. So I don't care, and they're all getting fees. It's kind of a rental. They're getting rental fee income no matter what it is. Helped develop them trillions of assets, not just here in the U.S. and the U.K., in Canada, in Australia, and made their asset managers billionaires. Okay, have they ever called up and say, "Hey, Ted Benna, thank you. You made us billions. Thank you." Have they ever thanked Ted Benna or sent you a big check?
I've had a lot of people in the business, Barry, that have done that, but definitely not the head people at Fidelity and Vanguard and so forth. Abigail Johnson's never sent me a text to say, "Hey, I really want to thank you for." I mean, those entities were mom and pop businesses before 401k. So.
Yeah, but that the whole 4K just changed the whole thing, and it's just to me it's just and then I'm gonna have, by the way, I'm gonna have John Kay, who it's all but now they're gambling with other people's money. So
Yeah. Yeah, well, Barry, I cover in the book in great detail, the history of fees and how we got to where we are. And one of the issues early on was that funds that 401ks were going into, for example, at Fidelity, were retail funds that were designed and priced to take in a few $1,000s. Okay, and I remember hitting Fidelity with the fact that, look, you're getting plans now coming in with $100 million of funds. You need to change the fee structure. And I was told, well, we can't do that. We have to treat everybody the same. And and we're chuckling because American funds might have 13 different classes now with different fee structures. And
T-shares and stuff like that. I mean, I've seen this stuff like, who invented this stuff?
so how in the world, when there's all this talk about, well, you should find out what fees you're paying. How in the world is the average person, invested in a fund group like that going to have a clue what the heck they might be paying?
Yeah, and not only that, the shenanigans, Ted. I've written 3 books on this stuff. And people get my books at BarryJamesDyke.com. Or Ted, your book's on Amazon, right?
Yes.
Yeah, right. So I highly recommend Ted. Ted's a truth teller. But there's so much shenanigans which you don't even see behind, not just the fees, but the share lending and all this stuff, and lending out your stocks so other guys can short them, stuff that you and I would never even see, not even think of. But it's a big business for these companies, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
And no one's talking about it in the media, do they? I mean, as a matter of fact, weren't you at a symposium last year or something like that? And did they treat you like a skunk at a summer picnic, or what? What happened?
No. I did a CNBC interview. That went really well. But I think maybe what you're referring to is Wall Street Journal. For a couple of years now, it's been running something called The Future of Everything, which is a big event. And so I was the old guy, that got invited to talk to all those techies. And, it was interesting, Barry. But a couple things, that came away from that that really hit me was lunchtime. I was able to sit at a table with a few of those young techies that have the next great answer to everything. And so he finally asked me, he said, well, what do you think the next big thing's going to be to impact us? And I said, oh, the next economic blow up. They looked at me like, yeah, man, I mean, boy, well, what's you crazy, And the other thing I walked away from Barry, was, you mentioned my faith earlier, and I just walked away, from that whole thing that there's no perception that there's something bigger than us, that maybe influences what's going on and, may cause us to think a little more about that today, because, this was all about, we can master anything and everything.
With an algorithm, it's just,
Yep.
and it's just so silly, Ted. I mean, my faith is the most important thing in my life too. I don't tell anyone. I've said that. I've been on national radio and stuff like that, and I know it is for you because it'd be really difficult to keep going on this stuff unless you had some of a faith of a bit higher power or God or whatever. And so I admire you for doing that because I don't know about you, Ted, but I mean, I was around in '87. I remember in '87. Remember in the '87 crash? Okay,
Oh,
when
yeah.
market lost 23% in one day. You couldn't even pick up a broker. You couldn't even talk to anyone. I remember the dot-com meltdown. I mean, 75% of the listed stocks on the Nasdaq don't even exist anymore. I mean, I remember 2008 and 2000, and that's how I wrote my first book, The Pirates of Manhattan, and that's how I put me on this. I said, everything's really kind of goofy and all this debt and derivatives, and then we had the collapse of that kind of put me looked like Notre Dame, and I wasn't a good Notre Dame, so I just researched a lot. And now, Ted, it's just, I think we're in for the mother of all corrections. That's just my personal opinion, but what do you think?
Well, I agree, but I'm 78 years old, Barry, and
They're looking good.
so talking from a personal perspective, I'm not anxious. And I have peace. I know what my ultimate end is. I'm confident because of my faith in
Yeah.
Jesus, where I'm heading. So I want to put that in perspective when I go more broadly here. That I think it's going to blow up. I mean, how long can we keep printing money? I mean the states and the local governments are facing huge problems, and they can't print money. That isn't. They can't.
They can't do the stuff that. They can't do that, can they?
So I mean, they're dealing with hard realities that are beginning to start to hit. With the significant drop off in revenues. I mean, I heard, just yesterday of one business guy who's leaving Seattle because of what they're doing, the taxes of businesses, to deal with, their economic situation, in Seattle. But, at the federal level, we'd be in a disaster now if they weren't printing money like they are. But how long can they keep doing that without inflation or meltdown or whatever, happening? And we're in similar situation around the world. I mean, U.S. certainly isn't unique by any means.
Yeah, no. I think we're the cleanest shirt in the dirty laundry. I mean, we're not the only ones who are doing this, but also, one of the things which concerns me or frightens me or whatever, if you, and I was talking to one of the country's top economists the other day, William Lazonick, and economic inequality, all this stuff, Ted, is worse than it was prior to 29. Right. So I mean, you have kids and grandchildren. Am I correct?
Oh yeah, sure.
So my father always taught me, you got to leave the world a better place than the way you found it. And what I see happening now is just a freaking disaster. But you turn on Bloomberg or CNBC or even Fox, whatever. Okay, they're all just marching along with the asset management industrial complex, and everything's good, and stocks are up, and the FANG stocks are up, and it's just like, GE was the largest industrial company in the world 20 years ago. Now it was lost 85% of its value. So I have a real concern about this stuff. Now, one of the things that I think we've talked about it before, but do you think people know? I think you and I have talked offline about this before, maybe when I had the radio show. Do people know that these mutual fund companies now are gambling with other people's money, particularly like in pre-public startups? For instance, I've got all the documentation on, Vanguard, Fidelity, John Hancock, Hartford, all these that invest in companies like Jewel and Zenefits and Lyft and Blue Apron but the huge flop was WeWork. I mean, a year ago it said that was valued at $47 billion. Okay, now I don't know what it's worth. Fidelity, Vanguard, Hancock, and T. Rowe Price sunk $468 million into this thing. It's an incredible scandal. It was when they were valuing this, it was valued around $102 a share in 2018. I don't know what it's worth now, $3 or if it's worth anything. SoftBank came in, but 10 major mutual funds are in this. Do you think the average person knows what they're doing with people's money?
Barry, my experience in talking to the average person who's investing in the market, generally they can't even tell me what they're invested in. So to answer you, obviously, if they can't tell you, and I'm just talking about, they may not even remember the organization, and certainly can't tell you which funds or what kind of mix they have. Well, obviously, they have a clue. The answer is no. They don't have any idea, none.
Yeah. So, but all these funds, as you know, the last crisis, Ted, was really created by leverage and a lot of debt, and the banking system is still more fragile. Matter of fact, I was watching, and I was reading the Financial Times this morning, and the Federal Reserve just said how bad these how over-levered they are, and the U.S. banks, they have actually no reserve requirements now. But it seems to me, I mean, this has just been, I've written, the 3 books about it, that life companies is still the most stable entity for managing retirement income because they can't lever themselves up. And you start with Provident Mutual. I started with Pru. I was Rookie of the Year for them 30 years ago, whatever it was. But they because they're not leveraged, they're still one of the safest places to put money. I mean, for retirement income streams. Don't you think that's still true?
Well, absolutely, Barry. That's one of the things I recommend in my book that I mentioned is, if you want a guaranteed stream of lifetime income, you're in a safer position if you take it out of your pension plan, state, local, federal, or private, and put it in a fixed income annuity with a top tier company like a Mass Mutual or New York Life.
The mutuals, yeah, the mutuals.
Whatever. I mean, and the reason for that is when let's just take the private system. I mean, if you take the state system, you're a teacher in a state school, the only backing you have is the assets, in their retirement program, which we talked about being substantially underfunded. That's it. If you're in a private sector, you have a private employer, your plan is underfunded. There's not enough money. You're in a program called, the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation.
PBGC.
PBGC.
Yeah.
Now, PBGC has assets, but they have a lot more liability.
Yeah.
So if your plan ends up there, at some point you're at risk of a significant ratchet down. Plus, you won't get your full benefits anyhow. Now, taking that situation, and let's say you take New York Life. Take New York Life.
Yeah.
Okay. New York Life has their assets, which are for real, and the reserve requirements are pretty severe. When you're talking about this, but they're also part of the state insurance fund. Now, the state insurance fund has assets, but no liabilities. So if New York Life were to fail, at least, there's a state insurance fund that, is a backup, there. That's greater financial security than the private pension system or state pension system.
Yeah. And that's even, that's even true when, people say, well, Barry, I tell them, I've written the books about it, and they said, well, what about AIG? And I was like, yeah, well, it's not a mutual, so I really don't like it as much. But the fact of the matter was, AIG was actually very, very solvent during when they collapsed in 2008. And matter of fact, Wall Street wanted to go after the reserves of the company, but New York, which is a very tough state, as you know, said, no way, Jose. And they wouldn't let them touch them. But so the legal, because the and operating in a state like New York is very, very tough. So people don't understand for every dollar on deposit, it has to be reserved, and they can't lever their balance sheets up. I mean, you can borrow money from an insurance company to build a skyscraper, whatever it is, but they can't create money out of thin air like the banks. So they'll always be safer. Which talks to me about New York is that, and I want to kind of get into this, Ted, just for a second, because I'm a big fan of mutual companies because they don't answer to Wall Street. You don't see none of these companies are perfect. I'll be the first one to admit it. I've dealt with all of them. I've spoken most of their conferences. I was on the board of one of the major ones. So they all have their problems. No one's perfect. No one's an angel. I'm not a saint. But they're safer when you look at a person with banks or an asset manager. But this is one troubling development. And there's I don't know, do you ever get this publication, Pensions and Investments, Ted?
Not anymore, Barry. I'm
Okay.
not.
Was it great?
Used to speak at their conferences and quite active with them, but
Yeah, so people, the reason I'm going to bring it, there was an article, this was last week's, about permanent capital importance for managers. And what they're talking about, and I've been railing about, and I've actually had discussions with CEOs of major companies about, and they agree, but no one wants to talk about it, is that how private equity firms are getting into the life business, and what they're calling it is, in pension investors, they're calling it permanent capital. And the whole thing is, to me, this is crazy. And the pension investments, and there's Arlene Jacobias, who's a great reporter, great researcher. She reported that, and this is as of June 30th, that Apollo Global Management, which owns Athene, which is a giant now, that 60% of their assets are permanent capital. And most of this is with Athene and Athora, which are two life companies. But these guys have been disastrous, Ted. I mean, for public record, Apollo has bankrupted Caesar Entertainment, EP Energy, Linens and Things, Alaris, Countrywide PLC, Innkeepers Trust, New Page, Momentum Materials, Verso Paper, Noranda Aluminum, Core Media, the American Idol thing, Intelsat, the large satellite company, Claire's Stores, Twinkies and Hostess cookies, Chuck E. Cheese just went bankrupt the other week, and no one's talking about it. Do people? I mean, I should give my money to someone like Apollo, who's going to gamble and bankrupt a company and put people out of work. I mean, I never saw this with Provident Mutual, New York Life, or Northwestern, or Guardian, or a lot of these really. I've never. They're very conservative, but I've never seen with this shenanigans.
that's a different world, Barry. And it isn't getting better.
And in fact, the Department of New York. We talk about New York. The Department of New York just fined Athene $45 million in April for doing the pension risk transfer, for operating without a license in the state of New York, essentially. And I know I'm still producing the field, and what we have to go through now is just incredible. I mean, the diligence, and my point is that with the growing giant, and there's just a lot of bankruptcies.
You're going to have a bigger list in 6 months.
Ted, I actually did this. I'm kind of anal. I'm kind of like you. I'm a doubting Thomas. That's my with the guy when the guy I forget which saint come in, he puts his hand inside Jesus' side, or whatever. I'm one of those type of guys. So I went back to 2000. I discovered, Ted, there's been roughly 365 major bankruptcies worldwide from private equity. And these are the guys who wanted to take over the life business. And there's got to be a lot more, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. Sure.
Now, as you know, I wrote my second book, The Pirates of Manhattan 2, A Highway to Serfdom. It's about target date funds. Now, this was put in, this is Pension Protection Act of 2006, which was another airline bailout bill. What do you think about target date funds?
Barry, I've got to tell you, I helped to push them.
Oh, you did?
Well, and that was after I had helped launch investment advice and saw how it ran awry, unfortunately. Um, I thought they were a better alternative. And
Yeah.
yeah, I'll say this. For people who don't have a clue what they're
Yeah.
doing,
Okay. All right. I understand.
all right, and that's most people who are investing in 401ks,
Yeah.
and those that are going to do the wrong thing at the wrong time
Yeah.
in terms
Okay.
of buying and selling, and also chasing what was hot a year or two ago.
Okay.
Uh, though those funds make sense, for people who want to stick their money someplace and
Yeah.
not have to think about it or know anything about it. But
Okay.
like anything else, they're far from perfect. Okay.
Yeah. And so I've seen, and I've actually done some work for a major company, and so what I've seen now, Ted, is that I've seen companies with tens of thousands of participants in 401ks, and that's all they get. Like they get target dates and maybe one or two or three other funds, and that's it. And I'm not. This is where my faith comes in, is that how they can come up and play God, saying, I don't know what's going to happen for lunch, never mind what I'm going to happen for dinner or what's going to happen next week. So how anyone can theoretically predict what's going to happen in 2030 or 40 or 45, whatever. To me, it's like they're being allowed to play God. Am I correct? Or?
Well, Barry, okay, let me just build on what I said earlier. I think for beginning participants and participants who are in their 20s and 30s and 40s, that aren't knowledgeable investment wise,
Okay.
and are accumulating and are investing every paycheck and continuing to buy shares, those are suitable vehicles. My concern is those who are approaching retirement or are retired, that those funds, which are supposed to be lifetime solutions, have much too much risk for most people.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Here's the problem, and I deal with it in my book, Barry. Um, when you experience a 30% drop, if you're 45, 50 years old, it's not necessarily bad because you're putting new money in. So you're going to recover. But what happens, individuals who retire and they're put into those type of funds, or they're put into the typical mix by investment advisors, and 2008 hit. You get 2008 hit the year you retire or after, and you take a 30% drop. You never.
you're never going to retire.
And here's the problem. The problem with that is you're now drawing money out. So as you're drawing money out, you're having to sell more shares. You're not reinvesting a discount. You're having to cash out at a discount. So these investment people who say, hey, look, you stayed in there, you recovered because the market, well, you didn't, because you took a 30% drop. And if you run that, and I've done this in my book, against the typical structured portfolio of, hey, expect a 6% return and withdraw 4% a year, you're dead.
Yeah. Thank you.
I mean, if you retire, you happen to retire at the wrong time. I mean, man, you're hammered.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, there was a friend of mine, Jeff Brumet out of Indiana. Jeff, if you listen, he gave it to me, and I'll have to provide it. He did the spreadsheet, is a Y chart, which they actually take the S&P 500, which Buffett and Jack Bogle. Actually, I got to know Jack, and then he died. But anyway, if you had followed this whole advice and staying in the market, is that everything went and imploded because of taking out 5% or whatever. And so really, retirement income, Ted, was meant to produce retirement income streams, but now it's like turned into casino and all this stuff. And I mean, it's getting so complicated. And if a 9-year-old can't figure it out, why would you buy it? I mean, it's at this point, but. Some of this stuff, Ted, I don't know. I've seen a lot of portfolios. Some I get confused of.
Yeah, what I'd like to see, Barry, is most people who are retiring, the amount they have accumulated, they should really be thinking hard about fixed income annuitizing, at least half of that, to lock in a guaranteed stream of income. And, they ought to do that. Now, that market, as you know, there are a lot of alternatives. Uh, you now could wait and maybe not lock in your fixed guaranteed amount until 70 or 75 or whatever. There are a lot of different alternatives to look at exploring, but certainly that should be a consideration for many people who are retiring.
Yeah, I do a lot of work on that. I probably do, oh gee whiz, probably 65% of my business on that regard. And the whole thing is that, and when you can get pretty creative if you get everyone's full pieces. You get out, what do they have for income or what do they want, for mortgages, all this. If you look at the whole picture, you can really do a good job. But, sometimes we'll tell people to use a SPIA, something like that, and use another deferral income or use laddering and things like that. And, we're also registered investment advisors. So we also handle securities. But, because my fear, Ted, is that the institutions, because of with the Secure Act now, they're kind of mandating income, or at least having to show it as income annuities. Am I correct with the Secure Act?
Yeah, and that's one thing, by the way, also that I've been encouraging for a few years is actually giving a tax break. Maybe the first $1,000 or $2,000 of guaranteed life income is not income taxable. To provide an incentive for
That's a great one.
For people to do that. And Barry, the lost revenue impact would be pretty minimal because average retirees aren't paying income tax or very minimal. So, to give that as an incentive wouldn't be a big deal. Now, one other thing that came to mind that I want to throw out while we still have the opportunity for people who are approaching or retiring is to think really hard about the other side of the equation. What is your lifestyle going to be?
Yeah.
Look at your expenditures.
Well,
Now, my wife and I back in '97 decided to leave the East Coast and head into the mountains of central Pennsylvania. We like it. We've got a son and two granddaughters and his wife, out this way, but hey, it reduced our living costs by a half roughly. So, things to think about are, if you have a pretty big house, do you hold on to it? Geographically, where you're going to be and so forth. And, look real hard potentially at ratcheting down the expense side because that's one part, that can certainly help you avoid running out, keeping the well from running dry.
I couldn't agree with you more, Ted. I have, some customers that I have who are big earners, but they have these, McMansions, whatever, and I'm saying, hey, look at, you're doing really well now, but I mean, you ain't gonna make it in retirement, so that's why we look at the whole thing because the taxes now. I mean, I've seen clients with real estate taxes of 30, 35,000, just the real estate taxes, Ted. But they're big earners, but no, I think really, and from personal perspective, I mean, my life's simpler than it ever was. I mean, I don't like a lot of fixed costs, and so you're on a farm now.
Yeah, a little 18-acre horse farm.
Now, are you still riding motorcycles? Do you
no, I bicycle, not motorcycles.
Did you used to have motorcycles, didn't you?
Oh, no way.
You said that, okay. Okay.
Definitely not. Hey, I'm in the territory where there are plenty of them that are ridden, but I'm not one of them, Barry.
Okay, so we agree along this stuff, Ted. So that I couldn't agree more. And what we do here, at our place, we do very sophisticated financial planning for people, and we look at all this stuff. But annuities is important. But it's if sticks worked, I'd recommend sticks. But annuities work, and they just work. And I don't know, did I ever share with you, Ted? I'll send it to you offline. Is that I've researched is that I've discovered that roughly about 3 to 500 major corporations have de-risked using annuities. Have I shared that with you before, Ted?
Yeah, I'm aware of that. Yeah, we helped launch the corporate-owned life insurance business, which then became the BOLI, the bank owned. I mean, shoot, we were pioneers in that market.
Yeah, so that's, it's still, and this is the whole thing, in my books I showed, this is with Bank of America and IBM, how they all, and General Electric, they all fund their executive pensions with life insurance and annuities.
Well, Barry, I don't know if you want to take the time for it, but this is one of the reasons. This is really an important historical issue. When the ERISA was passed, which I mentioned earlier, that put a cap on pension benefits. Okay. So what happened before that is when we were working with private companies in improving pension benefits, the CEO, CFO, HR director wanted to know, hey, how is this going to benefit us? Because that was their chief financial security as well as the other employees. And now when the cap was put on, what happened was then their primary benefits shifted into the non-qualified programs, and those non-qualified pensions plus huge payoff in stock options is what drove the wealth management of the senior execs, and it's the primary reason why we have this big gap today now between the top end and the bottom end. There's no linkage anymore, and we designed those life insurance products that those execs could go out and present to the board and say, well, if you give us this fat package, it's only going to cost 5 cents per share, because when we die, you're going to recover $100 million. Okay. And that's tax driven. Tax system permits that.
Yeah, it's funny. So you were the guy who designed some of this, and I was the guy who researched and said, oh, by the way, and, this is with all the banks, and it's a matter of public record. But, the funny thing is, Ted, I don't know, you've been more warned by the media, but I've been interviewed by Bloomberg and a bunch of other people. They won't republish any of this stuff. But, it is what it is,
That it is, Barry.
So
I'm sorry. The same thing, by the way, is why we have these fat contracts for athletes as well, as you probably know. These $200-300 million contracts. Same thing happens there. These guys are insured,
oh yeah.
so money is ultimately recovered. That's how they found out about Magic Johnson.
Well, that's good. Yeah, he was told the life insurance exam.
He signed the contract, and we took the insurance exam. They found out he had AIDS.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, and then that's what I call it the OJ protection, because OJ was a big believer of life. And when he finally, I don't know if he's in jail now or out of jail, but he moved to Florida because, the Florida protection for assets, and life insurance is 100% protected by the claims of creditors in bankruptcy in Florida. And so there's some good stories. I don't know how Pennsylvania is, but Florida and Texas and Arizona and New York are really great asset protection. So I call it the Ken Lay protection, when Ken Lay died, I mean, Enron was, the largest corporate bankruptcy of all time was Lehman Brothers, but Enron was right up there. And when they went bankrupt, Ken Lay, because he was a Texas resident, and this is, I documented in my book, I couldn't believe it when I first heard of it. But when he died in Colorado at 63, he had like 13 million in liabilities and 13 million in assets. So when he croaked and when he died, they got wiped out. But because he had over 10 million in split dollar life left over from Enron and another like $5 million in annuity left from as part of his compensation plan, his wife Linda, she got 15 million protected from the claims of creditors. So there's a lot of good benefits as well. Ted, this has been great. Are you working on any new projects now?
Barry, what I've worked on for the last about 3 years now is helping small employers set up programs other than 401ks. And here I'm talking about generally businesses where the owners earn 100,000 or less,
Yeah.
50, 75, 80. They might be solo entrepreneur types, and many small businesses are improperly sold 401ks.
Yeah.
Too costly, too expensive. So I actually came up with 4 different IRA-based designs that will enable small employers to compete and provide benefits similar to 401k without all the cost, complexity, or liability exposure. And if you go to my website, which is Benna, www.benna401k.com, you'll see that I've been competing with the Oregon Saves program, the Oregon mandate. Oregon has been the leading state in driving mandated retirement plans, and by this year, every employer in Oregon, even with one person, has to have a plan, or you'll be fined $100 an employee. And I'm
I didn't know about this.
well, and I'm not necessarily opposed to requiring employers to offer payroll deduction that employees save for retirement. But the problem is Oregon designed their own program that you have to go into, and it costs 100 basis points, and it's limited to a Roth IRA. So the 4 designs I've come up with have much greater benefits and can cost as low as 7 basis points. Less than 10% of the Oregon plan costs nothing to set up, no fees to operate. And so we have a free guide. If you go on.
Oh, so you trust that? I'd be interested with maybe rounding back on that because, as you know, I'm doing a lot of research in private equity. Do you know who the administrator is in Oregon? I mean,
Yeah.
who do you know? It's not a census, is it? Maybe.
Yeah.
No kidding.
Yeah, they get
Kidding me.
75 basis or 80 basis points. So what happened?
You're kidding. So Oregon, okay, well.
Well, what happened is they convinced Oregon to design this as if they were operating a 401k plan in their IRAs.
You're kidding me. I didn't know about Oregon, Ted. Okay, so a census administering, and a census is the old BICES. Remember?
Well,
yes. Which is right. You're in Pennsylvania, right?
They're our major competitor. We hired people from them. They hired people from us.
So Oregon, okay, well, Ted, this has been a wonderful interview. So Oregon's doing this too, because you know who California picked for Cal Savers program?
No, I didn't check.
A census.
Well, that's what I thought. Well, they're the one that, they're all following Oregon, is what I understand. Copying Oregon.
And you know who owns the census?
Yes.
It's private.
When I came up with these designs, I actually met with the census CEO and their head tech person. But this is the route they went.
Well, yeah, because beyond it's a small world, Ted. Because believe it or not, years ago when I had a big benefits business, I had one of my major clients was their business was sold to BICES, so I kind of followed it over the years, and then BICES was sold to Citigroup, and then J.C. Flowers, the private equity firm, carved it out of Citigroup, and they levered the hell out of it, pulled out $100 million in debt funded dividends, and now I think it's owned by Genstar Capital, which is another private equity firm on a leveraged buyout. So you have these major benefits operators. So it's operating in Oregon now. Oh, so it is a census, okay? But they're headquartered right down by you. Am I correct? Right?
Down the Philly area, suburban Philadelphia.
Oh, I didn't know that. But I, because I did some work for one client, and it was a reasonably very successful firm, and I just haven't been busy. But their 401k was managed by the census, and I said I can't believe what the fees are getting away with on this stuff.
Yeah. Well, so to go back to this, if any small employer, regardless of where they are, if they go to the website, they can download that guide for free. It doesn't cost anything. And what it does is it explains 4 different alternative ways that you can set up a plan other than a 401k. And then beyond that, if you want more help for $100, we'll provide ongoing support. Well, I'm sorry, no, there's another step. So the free guide gives you the basics.
Yeah.
Then if you center in on one of the models for $49.99, you can buy one of the model guides that goes into detail of how you do this on your own. You take it, and then if you want help beyond that, for $100, you can hire us to do that. So I'll give you a real example right now. 17 employee Montessori school in Oregon took the free guide. The head of it contacted us and said, I'd like some more info. So I got in touch with her and, chatted, and she was pretty smart. She had worked through this, kind of concluded that Model 2 was the way she should go. And I told her, yeah, definitely. So buy the $49.99 guide. So she's done that. Now she's come back and said, hey, I want a little more help. So I paid $100. So anyhow, we're helping her, work through getting this thing set up, to run, provide to her employees. So what she's going to do is actually set up a plan that will have both employee payroll deduction contributions, similar to Oregon Saves, but also have some employer contribution, which Oregon Saves doesn't. And, employees can invest for 8 basis points instead of 100 basis points.
That's wonderful, Ted. So this is kind of like your ministry, am I correct?
Well, I have a passion. I mean, I hate to see people employee saving for retirement getting ripped off.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, when they're paying 10 times more than what they need to, that means years of additional retirement income, Barry. I mean, and they're not getting anything. There's no greater value they're getting for it. That's the sad part of it.
And actually, this looks like in comparison to what the state pension plans are paying, 2 and 20, so, Ted, we'll have to do this again. This is wonderful. Any parting thoughts you could give our viewers? Because this will go out. I have a fan base, I don't know, about 6,000-7,000 advisors around the country and actually outside the country. So this will be going out to them. Any parting thoughts to for the viewers, or what?
Well, the advisors, I guess it would be the fact that while this small market isn't one that you can make any money of,
You can't.
there's a reason you need to have some concern about where the states are heading, because this is their initial entree. The California program allows them to pursue the rollover market. Now they're claiming they're not going to do that, okay? But they're definitely permitted to enter and fully engage in the rollover market. And the next potential risk I see to the advisor community would be a mandate in these states that participants in 401k plans have to be given the right to be able to put their money in one of these state-run programs rather than the traditional 401k investment. So I think the advisors need to maybe be aware and have some concern, longer term about where this state thing may go. And then other than that, when they do run into small businesses that they're not going to make any money on, they may at least point them, to our guide and say, hey, look, here's someplace, where you can go and get some, decent help of how to do this.
Yeah. Well, this has been great, Ted. Well, look at this will be posted. I'll be in touch with you. But this will be posted on BarryJamesDyke.com, the Economic Warrior. Ted, I can't thank you enough. You're a great guy. You're a fellow Christian, and you speak the truth. And because I think this is so important in any society where people save their money. And I can't thank you enough, Ted. And we'll have to do this again sometime.
He counted on America to be passive. He counted wrong.